Oh, look what the cold brought out. Everybody coming here to get warm. I see we have Dee and Terry in the house. Welcome, welcome. Good morning. Welcome to Pacific Unitarian Church. My name is Gary Hart, and I will be your worship associate today as we seek to represent progressive religious thought and anti-racism practices in the South Bay. If you're new today, we want you to know we have childcare for preschoolers and religious education for school-age kids. Religious education begins directly after the children's moment. We welcome people of all creeds, races, sexual orientations, and gender identities. We remember that this church sits on what was Tongva land, and we acknowledge that these indigenous people are still among us, and we thank them for this place. Now for everybody's favorite, announcements. Come chant with us this evening at 5 p.m. for our Kirtan service led by Kiki Wiley. Come exercise your mantra in this call and response service. And there's some brochures out, and there's a poster by the welcome table. Today at, what time is it? 5 o'clock, I think. We celebrate the Unitarian holiday of Luminescence on Saturday, February 10th. Luminescence is our holiday, people. That's a Unitarian holiday. February 10th at 6 p.m. in the hall. Bring your light and celebrate with us. There'll be potluck food and probably some music. And the important announcement, the annual Black and White concert is coming up March 2nd at 7 p.m. here in the PUC Sanctuary, led by Severin Bainan and Robin Patterson. Tickets will be $20 and will be on sale later this month. This is truly an evening of music and fun you should not miss. Once again, I'm going to remind you our Monday lunch packing program is in need of donations of small chip packs, applesauce cups, single serving oatmeal, and anything else you can bring in and help them out. And now Rachel, where's Rachel? She's going to come up and make an announcement.
Hello, everybody. Buenos dias. I want to let you know that today we're going to have our social justice. We're going to have a social justice table outside. So much going on in the world, but also in honor of MLK. We're going to be playing his Beyond Vietnam speech. Very cool. And there's art outside for the kids, Blackline Masters, if you want to pick one up for a grandkid or you, the kid inside of you, and do some groovy art with him. Also, Barbara has gotten us like 100 postcards, and she wrote them all to different Congress people. We're promoting a ceasefire in Gaza and a begin of negotiations and a settlement of this decades-long conflict in the Middle East, and so you can participate and do that. And we also have something, cool flyers, and I'll teach you how to use a, I don't even know what it's called. What's it called? Not Barker. Thank you. QR code. You just put your phone up and you're on websites. It's really cool. You can take action. We have petitions. We also are raising money for Palestinian children, and we have a couple of wonderful donations. We've already raised $1,300 for Palestinian children, so we're out there doing some fundraising today. And lastly, I'm going to be for KPFK interviewing the head of the local chapter of Jewish Voice for Peace. And I would love anyone to come to me and give me any questions you would like me to ask that person for the interview that will go on the radio in a little bit. Thank you so much. Come see the table.
Thank you, Rachel. All good stuff. Now it's time for our chalice lighting. It'll warm up the place a little bit this morning. Our chalice lighting words today come from Reverend Eric Williams and is entitled, "Blessed is the Path." Blessed is the path on which you travel. Blessed is the body that carries you upon it. Blessed is your heart that has heard the call. Blessed is your mind that discerns the way. Blessed is the gift that you will receive by going. Truly blessed is the gift that you will become on the journey. May you go forth in peace.
Good morning, everyone. My name is the Reverend Chloe Briede, and I'm happy to welcome you here to Pacific Unitarian Universalist Church. Whether it's your first time among us or your 100th time among us, we're happy to have you with us on this Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Sunday. I also am grateful to Severin this morning. We had a guest musician all scheduled for you, and we were so excited, and she was sick this morning. So thank you to Severin for sort of stepping in and pinch hitting this morning for us. In a moment, we will sing Lift Every Voice and Sing. James Weldon Johnson, the author of these lyrics, says this: a group of young men in Jacksonville, Florida, arranged to celebrate Lincoln's birthday in 1900. My brother, J. Rosamond Johnson, and I decided to write a song to be sung at the exercises. I wrote the words and he wrote the music. Our New York publisher, Edward B. Marks, made mimeograph copies for us, and the song was taught to and sung by a chorus of 500 colored school children. Shortly afterwards, my brother and I moved away from Jacksonville to New York, and the song passed out of our minds. But the school children of Jacksonville kept singing it. They went off to other schools and sang it. They became teachers and taught it to other children. Within 20 years, it was being sung over the South and in some parts, other parts of the country. Today, the song is popularly known as the Black National Hymn. It is quite generously used. The lines of this song repay me in an elation, he says, almost an exquisite anguish whenever I hear them sung by Black children. And those are the words from the author of this song. I have other words also I'd like to tell you, and they were written by my friend, the Reverend Aisha Ansano, and she reflects on this song as well. Martin Luther King Jr. Day is a time when particular songs get sung, she says. One of them is Lift Every Voice and Sing. It gets sung in schools, in church, and at various MLK Day celebrations or over the course of Black History Month. It's a very, very powerful song, but it's often sung without context, and at times it's sung without a lot of intentionality. When you sing Lift Every Voice and Sing, do you pay close attention to the words? It's easy on a Sunday morning to open the hymnal and sing along without necessarily processing what they're saying, what the words we're saying really mean. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Bitter the chastening rod felt in the days when hope unborn had died. We have come over a way that with tears have been watered. We have come treading our path through the blood of the slaughtered. This song deserves to be sung with attention, Reverend Ansano goes on to say. It's a song that starkly names the horrors and violence of racism in this country, and it is a song that should make us uncomfortable. Uncomfortable with the history that it calls upon, uncomfortable with the fact that the struggle for racial justice continues. And it has not quite come as far as it should have, this struggle. How can anyone sing the words, treading our path through the blood of the slaughtered, without deep, deep discomfort? So when we sing this song, will you join me in singing it with intentionality? Will you join me in the deep discomfort that I will be feeling singing those words? Discomfort with the pain and horror that those words refer back to, and discomfort with the fact that those words do not only refer to a distant history, but also to what's happening now. Will you commit to sitting with your own discomfort? And then, will you tap into that discomfort and do something? Will you lift your voice and sing until earth and heaven ring with the harmonies of liberty? You're invited, my friends, to rise as you're willing and able for number 149. Lift every voice and sing. And I'm going to invite Kara up here for the time for all ages.
Maybe, yeah, okay. Hi, I'm Kara. I'm the coordinator of religious education, and I am going to read Desmond Gets Free in honor of Martin Luther King Jr. Day today, and I invite any children that would like to come and sit and listen to the story. Desmond Gets Free by Matt Meyer. Desmond the mouse lived in the most beautiful meadow in all the land. Every morning, Desmond woke with the sunrise and would spend the day playing in the meadow. And every evening, Desmond would go to sleep in the middle of the meadow under the beautiful sky. One night, Desmond awoke when it was still dark out. He tried to roll over to a more comfortable spot, but something wasn't right. Desmond realized that his tail was stuck right to the ground and beginning to throb with pain. He felt behind him, and there was a huge boulder that seemed to have fallen in the middle of the meadow, just on his tail. Desmond pushed the boulder, tugged on his tail. He pushed on the boulder and tugged on his tail. And he pushed and tugged and pushed and tugged, but it was no use. When he was out of breath and just about given up, he saw a giraffe nearby in the grass. Good news, he thought. Oh, giraffe, Desmond cried. Could you please push the boulder a few inches in the other direction so that I could go free? The giraffe looked at Desmond and laughed at the way giraffes do. Silly mouse, said the giraffe. That's no boulder. That's an elephant that's fallen asleep in the middle of the meadow just on your tail. Well, if you could just wake the elephant up to ask him to roll over just a few inches in the other direction, I could go free. Well, replied the giraffe, you know what they say about letting sleeping elephants lie. I find it best not to get involved in other animals' business. I find it's best to remain neutral in times like this. Desmond quietly replied, well, I do not appreciate your neutrality. The giraffe wandered off, and Desmond tried calling out to the elephant to wake him up. But those giant ears were just too far away on the other side of that giant elephant body. So again, Desmond pushed on the elephant and tugged on his tail. He pushed and he tugged and he pushed and he tugged, but it was no use. When he was out of breath and had just about given up, again, a gazelle wandered by. Oh, gazelle, he cried. Oh, gazelle, it seems that an elephant has fallen asleep just on my tail in the middle of this meadow. I'm stuck and it hurts. I wonder if you could gently wake him up and ask him to roll over just a few inches in the other direction so I might go free. Well, said the gazelle, I see your problem there, but you know what they say about letting sleeping elephants lie. I find it's best not to get involved in other animals' business. I find it's best to remain neutral in times like these. Desmond replied, almost to himself, this time, I do not appreciate your neutrality. Desmond tried again to call out to the elephant. He tried to push the giant animal away. He tried again and again to tug his little tail free, but it was no use. When he was out of breath and had just about given up for the last time, he saw another mouse wandering through the meadow. "My name's Nelson. Nelson, this Okay, there we go. Nelson, this giant elephant has fallen asleep just on my tail in the middle of this meadow. I wonder if you might run over and call out into his giant ears and ask him to roll over just a few inches in the other direction so that I could go free. Desmond asked. "Of course," said Nelson. Nelson ran all the way to the other end of the giant elephant body, and he called up to those giant elephant ears at the top of that giant elephant head, but the elephant didn't budge. The elephant heard Nelson's small voice far away, but he felt too comfortable to move. Nelson ran to Desmond, a little out of breath, and said, "I have an idea. Don't move." He ran off. "I won't," muttered Desmond. A little while later, though, Nelson emerged through a tall grass. He wasn't alone. Nelson found the other mouse friends to help him, and each one of them had also brought another 3 friends. The whole group of them ran over to the giant head of the giant elephant. One mouse scrambled onto the shoulder of another, and another mouse scrambled up on her shoulder. And then one after another, they climbed up until the whole group of them had formed a long mouse ladder right up the side of that elephant. At last, Nelson climbed up the shoulders of his mouse friends, one on top of the other, until he was way up on that giant elephant head, standing next to that giant elephant ear. "Excuse me," he called out right into the ear. "It seems you have fallen asleep on my friend's tail in the middle of this meadow. I wonder if you could just roll over a few inches the other direction so he might go free." The giant elephant made a giant low groan. "Grumph. I'm comfortable just where I am. Go away." So Nelson asked more of his mouse friends to climb up. One by one, they helped each other up the side of the elephant. One by one, they called out into the giant elephant's ear on top of that giant elephant head. Again, the giant elephant made a giant low groan. "Grumph. I'm comfortable just where I am. Go away." Then Nelson had an idea. He whispered to the mice, and then all at once they yelled out together, "Excuse us. It seems you've fallen asleep on our friend's tail in the middle of this meadow. Roll over a few inches in the other direction so he might go free." This time, all those voices together, right next to the elephant's ears, were too loud to ignore. "I was comfortable where I was, but I'll move over if you just agree to stop making such a racket," the elephant cried out. Then the elephant rolled over, just a few inches in the other direction. Nelson and the other mice helped each other climb back down, and Desmond was finally free. Desmond and Nelson and all their mouse friends spent the rest of that beautiful day playing in the middle of that beautiful meadow. If you are neutral in situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor. If an elephant has its foot on the tail of a mouse and you say that you are neutral, the mouse will not appreciate your neutrality. And that's a quote by Archbishop Desmond Tutu.
Now let us sing to the power of faith within. Now
Now is a time when we light candles of joys and sorrow. These candles of joys and sorrow are personal milestones that might have happened in your life, personal griefs, personal events that you'd like to share with us today. We, as a community, hold your griefs and sorrows. We hold your joys, and we hope that by giving voice to them, you might feel a little bit lighter of your burden. So today, you're invited to share candles of joys and sorrow.
Chloe said I could read this to you. This candle is in honor of the mothers who lost their little girls in the bombing of the church in Alabama. And it's called The Ballad of Birmingham by Dudley Randall. Mother dear, may I go downtown instead of out to play and march in the streets of Birmingham in a freedom march today? No, baby. No, you may not go, for the dogs are fierce and wild, and clubs and hoses, guns and jails aren't good for a little girl. But Mother, I won't be alone. Other children will go with me and march the streets of Birmingham to make our country free. No, baby. You may not go, for I fear those guns will fire. But you may go to church instead and sing in the children's choir. She has combed and brushed her night dark hair and bathed rose petals sweet and drawn white gloves on her small brown hands and white shoes on her feet. The mother smiled to know her child was in a sacred place, but that smile was the last smile to come upon her face. For when she heard the explosion, her eyes grew wet and wild. She raced through the streets of Birmingham, calling for her child. She clawed through bits of glass and brick, then lifted out a shoe. Oh, here's the shoe my baby wore, but baby, where are you?
That was lovely and sad, and yeah. We're doing something new this year. If it's your birthday week, free lunch. My mom just went to New Orleans, so I hope she has fun, and I hope that she arrives and gets home safely.
I have a joy, and to share with everyone. It's not my joy, but it's our joy, I guess. Marina Kisner, Andy and Janet's daughter, just graduated with her doctorate degree. She's an occupational therapist, and yay, right? And then also I wanted to say, grief is hard. And I know we're all grieving so many people we've lost here as of late, and I know I'm grieving somebody who was spectacularly special to me, and it's kind of interesting because I know as the months go by and people get back to the normal, it's hard to admit to anybody that the tears in your eyes are about that. But 3 months later, 4 months later, 6 months later, doesn't mean you're okay. It just means you try to maybe hide it. So I'm saying this for all of us hiding it.
I feel like I'm a candle hog, but this is a really good one. My grandnephew, Vincent, was born Monday, January 8th, 7 pounds, 5 ounces, and he's the first baby we've had in our family for 18 years, and he is my sister's first grandchild at 80. So we're really very happy.
I just wanted to say thank you for all the thoughts and prayers you sent to me last weekend when I was in the hospital. And it was my birthday also. But I just wanted to say thank you. And I was in 3 days, and at the end of it, they just said, we can't find anything wrong with you. Go home. So I'm very happy.
My very good friend, Julia Schwartz, passed away January 2nd, surrounded by his family, grandchildren, children. He was a member of this church. He and his wife, Virginia, were a member of this church for many years, quite a few years ago.
And I will light another candle for all those joys and sorrows unspoken.
I invite you to relax into your chair. Maybe putting your feet on the ground if that feels good. Moving around a bit to settle in. And if it feels comfortable, you can take a deep breath in with me and out. A deep breath in again. And out. And if that isn't comfortable for you, you might instead just listen to the sounds in the room. Letting those center you. Prayer gives voice to our aspirations. Prayer softens our hearts and readies our spirits. I invite you to join me in this short prayer by the Reverend Dr. Jackie Lewis. She says, "Today we pray for peace, knowing that peace starts within each of us. It starts with choosing to see each person we encounter today and throughout the week as a sibling, no matter how different they seem to be. And while we acknowledge that prayer alone is not activism, we know that it is a pathway to soften our hearts and ready our spirits for the task at hand, healing the world with fierce love. We are all survivors. We are all our ancestors' wildest dreams. This week, when we may feel triggered by the so-called other, may we breathe and know that God is love, and God loves us all. May we reflect that love to one another, that fierce love that can change the world. That fierce love that can bring peace. As we pray for that, let us take a moment of silence. May it be so. Amen.
We have two short readings today. The first one comes from Audre Lorde's The Transformation of Silence into Language and Action. And of course I am afraid, because the transformation of silence into language and action is an act of self-revelation, and that always seems fraught with danger. But my daughter, when I told her of our topic and my difficulty with it, said, "Tell them about how you never really a whole person if you remain silent, because there's always that one little piece inside you that wants to be spoken out. And if you keep ignoring it, it gets madder and madder and hotter and hotter. And if you don't speak it, one day it will just up and punch you in the mouth from the inside." Our second reading is from Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King from Ebenezer Baptist Church, January 16th, 1966. This hour in history needs a dedicated circle of transformed nonconformists. Our planet teeters on the brink of atomic annihilation. Dangerous passions of pride, hatred, and selfishness are enthroned in our lives. Truth lies prostrate on the rugged hills of nameless cavalries, and men do reverence before false gods of nationalism and materialism. The saving of our world from pending doom will come not through the complacent adjustment of the conforming majority, but through the creative maladjustment of a non-conforming minority.
In a few minutes, we will sing "Precious Lord, Take My Hand" as our centering hymn. On April 3rd, 1968, Martin Luther King Jr. flew to Memphis, Tennessee, in support of a strike for higher wages and better working conditions for Black sanitary public works employees. That day, he delivered his "I've Been to the Mountaintop" speech, in which he talked about threats to his life. He said, like anybody, "I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place, but I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. He allows me to go up to the mountain, and I've looked over. and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. And I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. The next day, April 4th, 1968, at 6:01 p.m., King was shot in the head while standing on the second floor balcony of the Lorraine Motel in Memphis, Tennessee, surrounded by friends and associates. As he lay dying, he spoke his last words to his friend and musician, Ben Branch, who was to perform at the event King was scheduled to attend that night. King said, "Ben, make sure you play Take My Hand, Precious Lord, in the meeting tonight. Play it real pretty." Precious Lord, Take My Hand was written by Thomas A. Dorsey in 1932, following the death of his wife in childbirth and their baby shortly thereafter. The song came to him as he played the tune Maitland, or Must Jesus Bear the Cross Alone, with some rhythmic alterations and melodic ornamentation of the Maitland tune. Dorsey's version followed the original with some substantial alterations of measures 5 and 7 of the original. Of Dorsey's more than 200 songs, Precious Lord is the best known and most sung. King developed a love for this hymn when he first heard it sung by Mahalia Jackson. King's funeral took place on April 9th, 1968 at Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta, the church where both King and his father had served as co-pastors. His good friend, singer Mahalia Jackson, sang Precious Lord at the funeral. Her performance was slow, emotionally expressive, and it had sort of this feeling of being able to slide in and out of notes with the sorrow that she was feeling. Later that day, Jackson sang the same song again at a service held at Morehouse College in Atlanta, King's alma mater. It was also sung by Aretha Franklin at Mahalia Jackson's funeral in 1972. We will now sing as our centering hymn, number 199, Take My Hand, Precious Lord.
Take
Tomorrow is Martin Luther King Jr. Day. Each year, Unitarian Universalist congregations mark his legacy by reflecting on his words and reigniting our spirits towards his call to justice, to freedom, and to equity. Some celebrate in worship, others forgo worship for this day to do a day of service. Today, we consider a story that tells us that inaction and neutrality are not the answer. Our story of the mouse and the elephant. The poor mouse tries all that it might to get unstuck and only gets free when a bunch of other mice come to help him, each climbing up on top of each other to reach the elephant's ear and make him move. The book is making 2 points. First, we have the folks who don't want to help, the giraffe and the gazelle, and they don't want to get involved or speak up. Perhaps they're afraid of the elephant, or maybe they're busy, or maybe as neither an elephant nor a mouse, different species, you see, the whole thing isn't really their issue. The second point is in order to make a change, especially when power is so unequal, it takes a lot of people to speak up to make a difference. The elephant didn't hear one mouse at all, and even when we saw a handful of mice try to wake him, he refused. It took a lot of noise from many mice to make a difference. We saw this in struggles during the civil rights movement. It took huge groups of committed protesters and activists with both legal and ethical pressure to push a large system to desegregate and provide more rights to Black folks in America. Systems of injustice are so large and so entrenched that they can feel as big or even bigger than that elephant. Try as we might to move the world for justice, it feels like we're the second or third mouse yelling in the sleeping elephant's ear. One of my fondest memories of my activism in college was a protest we called Funk the War. It was a protest against the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan and the companies that profited from war. We marched down the streets of Washington, D.C. with fun signs, and we were wearing dancing clothes, people in disco outfits and bright colors, and with a boom box on a cart, and that cart attached to a bicycle, and we were dancing and chanting, and it was sort of like a dance party protest in the streets. And I can still feel the energy and exuberance from that protest. It really was fun. We were trying to speak up against a huge military-industrial war complex, to speak up for folks who were dying in Iraq and Afghanistan because of never-ending war. Honestly, though, we were sort of like that second mouse, I think his name was Nelson, sounding the alarm, but with little backup to help us move the elephant. We were not able to change the system. We had tried, but we needed more people to protest, more people to help and care. Feeling small like that mouse in the face of an elephant can also happen to us in everyday life. I regularly listen to a podcast about people who work as EMTs, emergency medical technicians, and paramedics. It's an interesting listen that describes the good and bad cases with critiques and a lot of humor. The podcast is really about trying to help other EMTs and paramedics out there do better. When I listen, I get to take some time and learn about a world that is completely different from ministry, and I love getting the little glimpses of other people's worlds. One of the cases they described involved a young EMT and a very, very long-serving paramedic. To be clear, paramedics are more advanced in their training and skills than EMTs, and they're usually the boss in situations. The case described a new green EMT who saw very problematic behavior on the part of the older paramedic. The paramedic was a physically larger man who, when critiqued or questioned, lashed out with anger and even used his body to be imposing and threatening. He also had seniority and, of course, a higher rank. The EMT had a call where the patient needed a certain type of care. They were attending to someone who had experienced an overdose, and the paramedic, out of laziness and judgment, had decided to not bring all the needed gear into the call, forgetting things like their oxygen bottle, not wanting to bring them up from the ambulance to the back of the house 2-story apartment. The EMT thought differently, but chose not to speak out, not wanting to receive the ire of his partner. It's clear as you listen to the story that the health outcome of the patient could have been better just with them deciding to carry some heavy gear to the 2nd floor. The podcast goes on to address bullying and workplace and systematic fixes to prevent such behavior. It was an interesting listen, especially as I reflected on the book Kara read to us today. Sometimes a system, or even a person in this case, is so big and daunting that speaking up to fix it feels impossible. Things feel too scary. And that silence doesn't feel good either. Not being able to act may feel like a violation of our own moral values. The EMT in the story expressed his regret for not speaking up and for not doing anything. Audre Lorde and her daughter capture this feeling perfectly. Tell them about how you're never really a whole person if you remain silent, because there's always that one little piece inside of you that wants to be spoken out. And if you keep ignoring it, it gets madder and madder and hotter, and if you don't speak it out one day, it will just up and punch you in the mouth from the inside. I like that description of being punched in the mouth from the inside. It describes the urgency to act, especially in times of injustice. I can imagine the EMT from the case needing to do something, and at least giving his call to this podcast felt like an action. He opened himself up as an example for critique and to help others learn to deal with that situation. And have you ever had those times when you don't speak up and it stays with you on repeat over and over and over again? A square dance friend recently told me about an experience he had in dance class. He was attending an introduction to a new dance level, the advanced level, and someone got mad at him for doing it wrong in a first-time introductory class. He left the class and never went on to really learn that level. Years later, he recounts wishing he had just spoken up. He wishes he had said, "No, this is an introductory class. I'm learning. I'm allowed to make mistakes," instead of slinking out the back door in shame. Injustice and systems that support it are like elephants, or even our bullies from the stories. They don't want us to speak up or act. They would rather us not notice the injustices and inequalities, perhaps be asleep to it instead. Or if we have to see the situation, perhaps take a neutral stance. In 1966, Martin Luther King Jr. gave the Ware Lecture, a historic, prestigious lecture at the Unitarian Universalist Association's General Assembly. His lecture was titled, "Don't Sleep Through the Revolution." It's a long and rousing read, and if you want to read some of Dr. King's words tomorrow, please look it up. You can find it online. He uses the example of Rip Van Winkle in his lecture. Van Winkle falls asleep and awakens 20 years later, having missed the American Revolution. Dr. King points to a little mentioned fact in the narrative. The portrait of King George on the inn sign has been changed to George Washington. Van Winkle slept through the Revolution. Dr. King, in his lecture, implores Unitarian Universalists to not sleep through the Revolution. He asks for 4 things. First, that we instill in our congregations a world perspective, that we not forget in these modern times how connected our world is. Second, that we must again and again reaffirm the essential immortality of racial segregation. Third, that we must refute the idea that there are superior and inferior races. And lastly, fourth, he says that we must move into the arena of social action. He called for these actions in 1966 at our association's gathering. His words are still relevant today. The book we heard today is based on a quote from Archbishop Desmond Tutu. If you are neutral in situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor. If an elephant has its foot on the tail of a mouse and you say that you are neutral, the mouse will not appreciate your neutrality. And I love how the mouse says that in the story. I do not appreciate your neutrality. The elephant is asleep, not to be bothered by the mouse. Are you asleep? Perhaps if you aren't asleep, are you the giraffe or the gazelle? Are you trying to maintain a place of neutrality? I sometimes get stuck in that place, watching from the sidelines, unsure of how to help or what to do. And while I think neutrality has its place sometimes, especially as we're reminded to act with moderation and to think about our behaviors, it isn't what's needed in the face of injustice or wrongdoings. As much as it doesn't seem to make a difference, we need action. We need to be the second mouse and the third mouse. We need so many of us to make a difference. We need you to speak up and not remain silent. In our current situation, there's a continued urgency to speak up about the conflict in Palestine. The UN reminded us today that today, this Sunday, marks the 100th day of war. And although I know this is a complex issue for many of us, if you feel called, if you feel like making a stance, we need more people to speak up for a ceasefire. The UN is even asking us to do that as they call for an end to suffering, accountability for possible war crimes, and an obligation to protect the children. There is an opportunity to support this cause. And we even heard earlier in announcements that there's postcards you can write to do that. And of course, there's other issues too that you can take a stand on, that you can lend your voice to make the chorus of voices stronger, to make us many mice talking about an issue. PUC is also hosting 2 events this weekend. Both are aimed at finding spiritual meaning in the midst of social justice struggles. A kirtan, a singing of religious songs and stories and praise from the Indian tradition, is tonight. And then tomorrow morning, there's an opportunity for yoga practice and a sound bath. We hope to remind you that prayer and music and spiritual meaning are important parts of any struggle for justice, and that they will leave you feeling re-energized and re-engaged as you continue with this work. May we have enough courage and wisdom to act. Join together no matter how small our voices might feel, no matter how much like mice we might feel at the moment, and act for justice. May it be so. Amen.
Thank you, Severin. Well, it's time for the Board of Trustees' favorite part of the service, our offertory. Today we split plate with Crop Swap LA. Founded by Jemiah Hargens in 2018, Crop Swap LA has grown from a small monthly neighborhood swap of fruits and vegetables to a globally recognized institution and movement. The Crop Swap LA mission is to grow food on unused spaces, creating sustainable jobs and local, nutrient-rich food in communities affected most by food insecurity. So keep that wallet open when the baskets pass by. And that reminds me of an untrue story that Pam Harris didn't tell me. Pam was telling me that on Sunday a couple of weeks ago, she drove by the Redondo Beach Catholic Church and she noticed a little boy on the steps with a big box and a sign that said, "Catholic puppies looking for a good home." Pam thought the puppies were cute and wished good luck to the boy and drove on. The next Sunday, Pam happened to drive by Temple Shalom in the South Bay and saw the same little boy and the same big box of puppies. However, the sign now said, "Jewish puppies looking for a good home." And then last week, Pam happened to drive by the Unitarian Church in Santa Monica, and she found the same little boy again with this box of the same puppies in front of the church. This time the sign said, "Unitarian Universalist puppies looking for a good liberal home." She stopped her car and got out and asked the boy, "Weren't those the Catholic and then the Jewish puppies before?" "Yes," the boy told Pam, "but now their eyes are open." Please give generously to PUC and to the Crop Swap LA. Now it's time for the affirmation of gratitude. I think we're not going to have it projected, so this is going to be a test. Let's see how well you can do this. Let's follow along. Let us be grateful when we are able to give, for many do not have that privilege. Let us be grateful for all those who share their gifts, for we are enriched by their giving. Let us also be grateful even for our needs, so that we may experience the generosity of others. You did good, thank you.
Thank you, Gary. I'm also grateful to Naresh, who's in the back today, because with our AV person on vacation, we're doing the best we can here. So thank you, guys. On September 2nd, 1957, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. visited the Highland Folk School in Tennessee. Part of the school's mission was to help prepare civil rights workers to challenge unjust laws and racist policies that discriminated against African Americans. The school also made a point of bringing Black and white people together to share experiences and to learn from each other. It was a dangerous idea at the time when Southern laws kept Black and white people segregated, and some white racists terrorized African Americans with deadly violence. Dr. King delivered the main speech that day, honoring the school's 25th anniversary. As a part of the meeting, folk singer Pete Seeger got up with his banjo. He plucked out a song he had learned at Highlander and led audiences in singing it. Later that day, Dr. King found himself humming the tune in the car. "There's something about that song that haunts you," he said to his companions. That song was "We Shall Overcome," and you're invited to stand as you're willing and able for number 169, "We Shall Overcome." And you're invited to stay standing, and if you'd like, you can grab onto somebody next to you or give yourself a hug, or you're welcome to stay seated. This church is dedicated to the proposition that behind all our differences, beneath all our diversity, there is a unity that makes us one and binds us forever together. In spite of time and death and the space between the stars, we pause in silent witness to that unity.
May the blessing of love be upon you. May love's peace abide with you. May love's presence illuminate your hearts, now and forevermore. So be it. Amen. Shalom, salam, namaste, and blessed be. And now our service truly begins.
Thank you, everyone. As always, we have lunch after the service. You're invited to join us. If it's your first time among us, lunch is on us. Otherwise, it's always $5, unless it's your birthday week now, which is awesome. Thank you, everyone, and we'll see you next time.